continuous effective possession, occupation and administration, and that Argentine rule would in effect be another form of colonial rule, but against the will of the islanders. There are two irrefutable and opposing truths: that Argentina desperately wants to possess the islands, and that the people who live there, the majority for 5 generations and many for much longer, are passionately British and, particularly after the Argentine invasion of 1982, have no desire to be made part of Argentina. The Falkland Islands are described by the British government as a United Kingdom overseas territory by choice. They are, in effect, their own country, with an elected legislative council, and could achieve complete independence from Britain if they so desired. There is an obvious geopolitical dimension to the Falklands-Malvinas dispute. At their closest to Argentina, the Falklands are some 250 miles from the tip of Tierra del Fuego, and over 350 miles from the nearest Patagonian coast, and are not considered to be joined to South America's continental shelf. Argentines talk of the continent as separate to the Malvinas. Argentina's belligerence is based upon the logic of considerable self-interest. The Falklands are the gateway to Antarctica and have the highest average per capita income in South America, plus the strong likelihood of oil and precious minerals. Whereas Argentina was once prosperous, now she is not, and it is hard to see how the Falkland Islanders could come to accept being taken over by them. Since the end of World War II, the United Nations has given precedence to the desires and needs of people over the territorial aspirations of nation-states. Argentina is in this sense being very old-fashioned, pursuing a purely territorial claim that is so clearly against the wishes and interests of the indigenous inhabitants of the Falkland Islands. However, many would argue that for Britain to have ignored both its own responsibilities and the Argentine desire for the Malvinas to the extent of permitting their invasion of 1982 is rather worse than old-fashioned. So what are the Falklands actually like? Raymond Adams, who served in the Falklands conflict, describes the islands.
The Falklands are in 3 parts. West Falkland is very much like the west coast of Scotland or Cornwall, very rugged place, very sheer cliffs, and a lot of wildlife. I think in a certain ruggedness is very beautiful. Very few trees. But apart from that, is quite a fascinating place. East Falkland is in 2 halves. The northern half is slightly more undulating and is the bit that comprises Stanley, so is more built up, although only relatively. The southern part of East Falkland is very, very flat. And in fact, going back later, I noticed that you could hardly see it from about 5 or 6 miles away, because it's very, very low in the water, very flat, and it's really very uninteresting. West Falkland, I think, is very attractive, and San Carlos and Falkland Sound, which runs through the middle, is quite an attractive part in itself. And the number of nooks and crannies, little inlets and waterways, particularly around West Falkland, make it a fascinating and almost unexplored place, although less so these days.
Captain Carlos Madero of the Argentine Navy.
People in Argentina, we really think that Malvinas is part of our country, that for reasons that we don't accept are separated from our country, but we have to struggle from different sides in order to get them back. So with Great Britain, I always had mixed feelings, because on one side I always admire their history. The few times I've been in Great Britain, people have been very kind, very respectful, and I really like the way of life of the British people. And I understand that we share a lot of things in common, and that we have to share what we have. Common enemies, and we share a lot of values, so we should have been always in the same team. Unfortunately, we have this problem about the Malvinas that put a difficult in the relations. And on that side, I was completely convinced that the Malvinas sooner or later has to be Argentina.
How close was the relationship between